Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lottie and these are some of my recent reads. I took a little break from doing any YouTube stuff for the last few months, so I missed a few wrap-ups, and this is essentially just a wrap-up of everything that I read in May, June and July. I'm going to try and keep this short and not go into too much depth with the books that I'll be talking about, but I do have a tendency to ramble on a bit, so we'll see how long this really is. So I want to start off with the books that I read for Asian Readathon, which took place in May. In May I tried to read almost all Asian books. Only one of the books that I read in May wasn't an Asian book, which I'll be talking about later on in this video. These are all the books that I read for Asian Readathon, plus an ebook and also another ebook that I did actually DNF. The one that I DNF'd was a poetry book called Songs of Love and War. I just couldn't get into it. It read more like a textbook to me than poetry. I don't know what was going on with it, so I got about 20 pages in and decided to DNF. So I will start off with the ebook that I read in May, and that was Antiemetic for Homesickness by Romalyn Ante. That was a poetry collection. She's a Filipino author who works as an NHS nurse in the UK. It was my first real experience with poetry and I wasn't really sure what to make of it because I don't really know how to react to poetry, but I just thought it was nice. It was also quite personal to her. It talked about moving from the Philippines to the UK to working as a nurse both in the Philippines and in the UK. I rated it 4 stars. I don't really have much else to say about it. It was just nice to read. So then for Asian Readathon I read one of my most anticipated books of the year, and that was The Infinity Courts by Akemi Bowman. I read Bowman's debut novel back in January, which was Starfish, and I really enjoyed that, so I wanted to read more of her books. And when I heard about this coming out earlier this year, I was super hyped. This is a young adult science fiction fantasy which follows Nami, is that her name? Yeah, which follows Nami, who has died, which takes place in the afterlife, which is called Infinity. And Infinity has been taken over essentially by this AI called Ophelia, who is essentially like Siri, and it's how Nami and a group of other people sort of try to fight this AI that is taking over. It was a really exciting book with a lot of like philosophical what happens when we die type of questions thrown in there. It was quite deep and I'm really excited for the sequel, The Genesis Wars, to come out next year. What I really liked about this is that it has a lot of sci-fi elements like the AI, and it's got like robots and tech, but also it reads very much like a fantasy. It takes place in these courts, which reminds me a lot of the Akatar series, and there's like princes and aristocrats. The tech side of things also feels a little bit magical, so I really like that this book crosses over between science fiction and fantasy. I of course rated it 5 stars, and also the cover is absolutely stunning. So then I read a middle grade short story collection which was Once Upon an Eid, edited by SK Ali and Aisha Saeed. This is actually the first real short story collection that I've ever read, and it is all about Eid, and I really like this because it helped me have an insight into what Eid is all about as someone who is not Muslim, but also felt homely. So even though I didn't really know anything about Eid before I read this, I felt like I was still part of the celebrations that were being talked about in this. It's a collection of 15 short stories. One of them is like a graphic novel comic type story, and it just talks about all different topics with Eid as the centre of them. So it talks about generosity, dealing with like health in family members. I think one of the characters has a sick mother. It was just a really cute, comforting read, and I think it would be perfect for people reading around Eid or just around holidays in general. I rated it 4 stars. I did really love it, but it slightly missed the mark for me just in terms of like the writing style. So I finally did start to make progress on my These Books Will Expire, whatever it's called, video. It's just a list of books that I'm going to unhaul in about a year's time if I haven't read them. And of course I had to make a start with it with The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee. I have owned this book for a really long time. Finally read it. I rated it 3 stars. It was just okay for me. I thought I liked it enough to want to read the second book, The Rose and the Dagger, and I actually ended up DNFing that. So I will probably end up unhauling this at some point as well. I don't really have a lot to say about it just because I can't really remember what happens, which is one of the main problems I had with The Rose and the Dagger. I just couldn't really remember what happened in this book. It follows Shahrazad and Khalid, who get married. Khalid is the ruler of Khorasan, and he is infamous for taking a bride every night and killing her, and Shahrazad volunteers to be his bride so she can kill him instead, and they end up falling in love. That is the general gist of things. There is some sort of overarching magic related plot, but it doesn't really feature that much in this book. And also one of the other problems I have with it is that it's famed on BookTube for being like this big romantic thing, and I felt like a lot of the romance between Shahrazad and Khalid happened off page. We don't really see them fall in love as a reader. It's just all of a sudden they're in love with each other, and I wasn't really there for that. So yeah, 3 stars. I then made an attempt with Battle Royale by Koushun Takami. I was really looking forward to this book, and I did really enjoy it. It was just a massive slog for me. It is so long, and obviously because it's a translated work, it doesn't read as naturally as a native English book might. I liked the action, I liked what was happening in the moment with the characters, but I felt like it fell short for me that there was just too much unnecessary information in there. There was a lot of stuff with characters' backstories that I just didn't really care about. And also there is a lot of characters in this book, and you follow every single one of them. I think that there is like 24 characters. No, there is 42 characters, not 24. There's 21 boys and 21 girls. You are following every single one of them as they fight for their life, and they die and they kill other people, and it was just a lot. I really liked the main 3 characters we were following and what was going on with them, and I liked cutting to different characters here and there. I felt like there was just so much information that it was really hard to keep up with what was happening in the story and all of these characters' backstories. I rated it 4 stars because I did really like it, but I don't think it's something I ever want to reread, at least in this format, because it was just a lot. And so the final book I picked up for Asian Readathon in May was Gyo by Junji Ito. This is the first ever Junji Ito I read, and I really liked it. I rated it 4.5 stars. It just missed the mark for me, and that was just because the ending was quite open-ended, and I quite like a story that has like a solid ending that is like, yes, this is what happens, rather than leaving the reader to speculate. But this is a manga that is about a fish that can walk on land, and then more fish start coming, and it just sort of spirals from there. It was gross, it was weird, and it was really creepy, and I loved it. I can't wait to read more Junji Ito because this was awesome. So moving on to a bunch of the other books that I read over the last few months. I will naturally make a progression into the next Genji Ito that I read, which was Venus in the Blindspot. This is a collection of short stories, obviously all horror, and I rated it 4 stars. I really liked it. One of my main complaints was that a few of the short stories in here were actually at the end of Gyo, so I'd already read them, and I thought, I know this is a short story collection, but if you're going to include short stories in your other books, at least make them all different. I obviously skipped over those because I had already read them and read them quite recently, but the other stories in this I really liked. They were weird and creepy just the same. I think my favourite one, or at least the one that sticks out to me the most, was The Human Chair. That was very strange. The Licking Woman, that was weird as fuck as well. What I also really liked about this is that it has some parts that are in colour. So like, for example, the first page here is in full colour. Here and there is bits of full colour as well, and I also like that at the start of the book you've got artwork from different Junji Ito stories. So I think this is a really nice book to have in a Junji Ito collection. But again, I'm really excited to read more Junji Ito books. So if you didn't know, over the last few months I have been participating in Witchlands Along, hosted by JD Ray Reads, and so of course for that I read Witch Shadow, Sight Witch, and Blood Witch by Susan Dennard, if I didn't already say that. So these are the second and third book and the 2.5 book in the Witchlands series. I rated Wind Witch 3 stars and Sight Witch and Blood Witch 4 stars. Just a quick overview. This is a young adult / adult fantasy series. It's kind of up in the air because I think in the UK it's published as adult, but elsewhere it's published as YA, which doesn't do well for the series because the way it reads can be really confusing. It's got the complexity of an adult fantasy and the pacing of a young adult fantasy, so it just is a bit all over the place. And pretty much everyone who has been reading this series for the Witchlands long has absolutely no idea what the plot is meant to be. The first book follows Safi and Iseult, who are thread sisters, which basically just means they're like family, and they're like on the run from a blood witch named Adjuan, and they find out that they're part of some greater prophecy, and yeah, it's all a bit like out of control. But by the time you get to Sight Witch, which is, although it's a novella, it is a key book in this series in order to understand what the hell is going on. Plot seems to have taken a completely different point. I don't want to say turn because it's not really going anywhere, but the series as a whole follows something completely different to what is happening in Truth Witch. I don't have to explain the series because it is just so confusing, but I have enjoyed each book in the series more as we go on. I wasn't really that into Truth Witch, and the same for Wind Witch. I didn't really like it that much either. I kind of don't remember what happened in this book. Sight Witch I absolutely loved. It was my favourite of the series at the point where I'd only read up to Blood Witch, and then Blood Witch I also really enjoyed. I liked following Adjuan and finding out more about him, but if all of the books were written like Sight Witch, I think I could have enjoyed the whole series a lot more. This is written sort of like diary format, it's first person, it's also got a bit of mixed media in there, and it was just a lot more fun to consume than the rest of the books. I wish that all of the books were a lot more like Sight Witch. So talking about another fantasy series, I finally caught up with the Wayward Children series by Seanan and McGuire, reading In an Absent Dream, Come Tumbling Down, and Across the Green Grass Fields. I rated In an Absent Dream 5 stars and the other two 4 stars. In an Absent Dream is my favourite of the whole series so far. I absolutely loved it. I loved the world we were in. I loved finding more about Lundy. It was just a lot of fun. Come Tumbling Down was a disappointment in comparison to it. It went back to following the Jack and Jill storyline, which I am sick of hearing about now, and I hope that that was the end of it. And then Across the Green Grass Fields, I really liked the world in that one as well. It just felt a bit out of place because it follows a character we haven't met yet. But the whole series, it follows these kids who go to these portal worlds, and it's sort of like their dream world. It's like their true home, I guess. And some of them get thrown back into the real world, and we learn about how they cope with that, and other books in the series follow them while they're in that world. And I definitely prefer the books that are taking place in the people's worlds. There's sort of like every other book goes back to following like a consistent plot, and I'm not enjoying those books quite as much. But following the pattern, the next book coming out should be one that continues on with that overarching plot, so I'm hoping that it's a little bit more exciting than Come Tumbling Down was. The other books are sort of a bit random, they don't really fit into any of the categories. I've already mentioned this one, The Rose and the Dagger by Renee. Second book in the Wrath and the Dawn duology. DNF'd it, didn't care for it. I can't remember how many pages I got through, but I just didn't care. I don't know if it's because I left it a few months after The Wrath and the Dawn, but I have left other series longer than that and remember what happened and got really into them, and this one I just didn't care, so I will be unhauling this at some point. I read a adult romance with lesbian vampires in it, Contract Bound by Elle. Really liked this one. It was a 4-star read for me. It was good, I enjoyed it. I just wish that it had been a little bit neater on the editing. It's completely independently published, so I understand that Elle doesn't have the same resources that someone with a contract with a publisher has. There were a few things that took me out of the story just because of the editing, and also I think the writing could have been a little bit stronger, but I really like this. It's like a bodyguard trope, so the main character, she is hired as a bodyguard for a vampire princess called Kia, and they end up having like an enemies to lovers type relationship. It was excellent. I really recommend it, and I would really love to check out more of Elle books. I also read Cinderella is Dead by Kalynn Bayron, a young adult fantasy that is a Cinderella retelling. I really liked this one. It was exciting and it was just a lot of fun, and it is also sapphic as well. So in the world this is set, all of the girls are sent to this ball where they have to basically just be like Cinderella, and then all the blokes come and take them as wives, and the women have no rights. They are basically in submission their entire lives, and Sophia doesn't want to do that. She's gay, why would she want a husband? So she's like planning to run away with her female friend. They supposedly have a relationship with each other, but all I got from the love interest was that she didn't like Sophia as much as Sophia liked her. So Sophia runs away, meets this other girl, and things spiral from there. I rated this 4 stars. I really liked it. It was just a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to reading this Poison Heart in September. I then read my first comics, Life is Strange Volume 1 and Life is Strange Volume 2 by Emma Vieceli, Claudia Leonardi and Andrea Izzo. These are a continuation of the game Life is Strange, if you have ever heard of that or ever played that. This takes place after that, and also you would have had to played or watched Before the Storm as well in order to sort of grasp fully what is happening. It's like a direct sequel to those games following a particular ending. It's really hard to talk about these because obviously to talk about what happens in them would spoil the game itself. Basically the whole premise of Life is Strange is there's a character called Max. She finds out she has time travel powers and she can rewind time. By doing this, she does like little things, you know, like, I don't know, you knock a can on the floor and it goes all over your laptop, so she rewinds time to undo that. She does little things, she does a lot of major things. This isn't really spoiler because I guess it happens in the first 5 minutes of the first episode of the game, but she sees her childhood friend get shot and she rewinds time so she isn't shot, and so that creates like a problem with time. It's sort of like the butterfly effect, where if Chloe, who is her childhood friend, lives, a lot of other things are happening. So this is about Max and Chloe and the aftermath of what happens at the end of the game. It was really complicated to explain. The game is a lot of fun. I love it so much. So I really wanted to give the comics a go, and this is great. It's a great continuation on of what is happening. The second comic expands the Life is Strange universe a little bit more. We meet another character who has similar sort of powers to Max, and yeah, it's also gay. It's got that sci-fi, but it's also a bit like contemporary. It's like a speculative element in the contemporary, and it's gay. So what is not to love about this series? I obviously rated them both 5 stars. They were excellent. And the art's really cute too. I think the art really fits in well with the game. The game itself is a little bit comic booky, and I think it goes really nicely as a companion. Like, look at that. That is just beautiful. So those were all the books that I read over the last few months. My favourite book was definitely The Infinity Courts. I love this. I think I need to reread it though because I'm starting to forget what happened. I read it so fast that I just didn't really take in what was happening. But I'm really excited for the Genesis War. And I would probably say my most disappointing book was Battle Royale. I was really expecting to be like fully invested in this and to love it so much, and I still enjoyed it. It just didn't live up to my expectations, very sadly. I'm not gonna hold up all the books just because I can't be bothered. Yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you read recently in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!